we were very fortunate to be able to get Ricky Royal to come and join us today. He is the designer of the solo part, the solo implementation of Pax Pamir, which comes with the game. We are going to talk about that with him, and we are going to step away and play that interview for you now, and we will be back afterwards with my top 10 solo games of all time. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. We are here with a very special guest. This is our first Skype guest on our podcast, and I couldn't think of a better one, especially for our solo board gaming exclusive episode here. I'm so happy to be joined by YouTube solo board gaming god, Ricky Royal.
Matthew, hi there. Thank you for having me. Hi.
Welcome,
and Jake,
man.
hi. How you doing?
Hey, nice to meet you.
Well, so for anybody who doesn't know, Ricky Royal has been making fantastic YouTube content since, I think he just told me, 2012. I think I've been watching since then. I think I jumped on with your Mage Knight videos when I was just getting into the hobby, and you had this incredible Mage Knight walkthrough that it was like my first heavy game. So it was my first, like, I had nobody else who played heavy games at that time, and this was like, in a way, I think like you made it possible for me to play heavy board games.
Well, thank you.
So, well, yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that video was like my first, like, okay, I'm going to tackle this game and I'm going to watch this man's videos that are many hours long and I'm going to watch them multiple times. And I'm going to learn how to play this game. And I did, and I played it a ton. And it will, when we, later in the episode, when you're not on, we're going to do my top 10 solo games. And spoiler alert, it's definitely going to make a, come up on that list as well. But tell me a little bit about what is your history with board gaming, and how did you get into gaming, and what is your background in that?
Right. Okay. Well, Mage Knight's a great choice, and I think that's probably one of the first games that I played after starting with Box of Delights and the YouTubing and everything else. I mean, I've always been a board gamer. I think we're born board gamers, but not always hobby games. The kind that we play now. I was always been a chess player, so I'm very much a strategy game kind of guy. And the two-player conflict is something that's always fascinated me. Growing up, watching, I think Nigel Shaw on TV as a Brit, but Gary Kasparov was always somebody who I loved watching, and of course now Magnus Carlsen is someone who's good to watch, and I still enjoy and play chess, but for me it was probably a little bit of a fascination of making videos as well as playing games, and those two things came together to create Box of Delights.
And what inspired you? I mean, to go from, playing these games and playing with other people or playing solo, what inspired you to pick up a camera and teach people how to play these games?
I think it was spending a little bit too much time. I was off work for a little time, and my brain is one that likes to be kept busy. And I remember watching, I think, a guy called Rodney Smith, who started about the same time as me.
Yeah, Watch It Played is his YouTube channel.
Exactly. And a guy called Robert, who was Black Belt Gaming, and he did a lot of storytelling through playing games, and it felt like a wonderful medium to explore a telling of story. So that was the first time really that I saw, and I think he was playing the Dungeons and Dragons series of adventure games, and Gears of War was being played, and I never really knew anything about solo gaming until I watched those guys. I think Mansions of Madness might have been the video I saw of Rodney's, and it was the idea of telling a story with a game that really captured my imagination, because it felt like a crossover of using game mechanisms to create a story on the fly, and that was something that really fascinated me, and that was something that I felt inspired to have a go at myself. Hence picking up and filming those kind of games.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about your videos so much, was that you did such a great job of evoking the story and the adventure. I mean, especially, like, I think Mage Knight was the first video I came to of yours, and it definitely it it helped bridge that gap between video games and board games for me.
Right.
And like, it totally felt like this. And I mean, just like you sort of have this sort of ASMR way of speaking that's like very relaxing and soothing. And it's, but it's like, all right, here we go. Here's the story. Like, you just, I don't know. It felt like watching good television, because it was like watching this story unfold while also, learning a game. And you're also just great at teaching games. Is that something you always sort of knew about yourself? Did you feel like you were a great teacher?
No, I never really felt great at anything, but I always enjoyed teaching people in my work. So that's something I always enjoy is teaching people how to learn new things. So no, I'm quite happy to try and teach people things. Yeah, for sure.
It's a definite skill. I mean,
thank you.
Teaching a game, it takes a certain type of brain, because you have to distill all this information into, a very clean and concise way while keeping it entertaining and not having, on YouTube it's different, but when you're sitting across from somebody at a table, you never want to see their eyes glaze over and watch them start looking at their phone while you're teaching a game.
Yeah, and as a casual gamer, being taught it in a nice and amazing way makes all the difference in the world. Because I could just as easily go like, okay, I'm not listening.
Yeah, well, I think I learned some of that from you, Ricky, in your videos, is that you're very good at communicating the entertainment of the game and the story of it, which is, I think, the easiest way to teach people how to play.
Well, thank you. I think I think Robert from Black Belt Gaming was an inspiration there. I don't think he's making so many videos now.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I remember his from back in the day. Yeah,
but I think lots of people now are doing this and are doing it much better than I am. But it's great to see that the hobby really taken off in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a great medium, and
it really
and now
is,
my daughter's 11 and my son's, well, he's 20 this year, but he still plays with me, and my daughter's playing with me now, and it's been a great hobby to share with friends and family. I've met so many great people, and it's bizarre that since starting Box of Delights, Board Games has introduced me to so many different people and really taken me on a personal journey that I never expected from a humble hobby. Yeah, it's been a great experience.
Yeah, I've seen. I think you've been posting some Instagram shots of you and your daughter playing games together, and I'm very envious. I have an 18-month-old, so I have a little bit of time to wait, but I'm very excited to inundate him with my gaming obsession one day.
It's never too soon. It just show them the pieces and let them build stuff.
We'll start with 18XX. I think that'll be our first game.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So I mean, you clearly like thematic games, but also heavy strategy games, and I think that leads us nicely into your work in design as well, because the two main games that I know you from now are Renegade, which is a cyberpunk themed cooperative game that plays beautifully solo. And also what we're going to be speaking about and reviewing on the episode today, which is the solo implementation of Pax Pamir Second Edition. So briefly, just tell us how you transitioned from playing games and making videos about them into designing them.
I think it was always an ambition to want to design, and I know that as a child, when I was playing those simple games, Snakes and Ladders and Monopoly and Sorry and all those games that you play as a child, I was still making up my own games. But as a hobbyist now and from Box of Delights, it was the being inspired to create something. I'm kind of a serial hobbyist, and I will always want to create things when I get involved. So when I wanted to learn to play guitar, for example, that wasn't enough. I wanted to write music as well, and when I wanted to, I always want to make something and build something. So it was kind of natural for me really to want to build something of my own, and I guess creating Box of Delights and maybe coming in at the right time, it opened the door a little wider for me to meet people, because I was talking to publishers and I was talking to designers, because I wanted to find out more about the games that I was playing and the stories that I was telling, and how did they come up with these things. So it enabled me to learn a lot about the hobby and put me in contact with with publishers. So for Renegade, for example, I was an admirer of Victory Point Games and Alan Emmerich and his studio of designers and people that he worked with. I mean, he's a guy who loves to talk and to teach and to show people how to do design, and he was somebody that I wanted to work with. So,
and they're UK based, right?
They're in North America, in California.
Oh, so. Wow. Oh, geez, they're right around the corner. Never mind.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought they were British. I think it's because they have a game called Dawn of the Zeds, which just makes me think that they're right. British.
Okay. Yeah. Not Dawn of the Z's. Yeah. So they were a company that I just sent the game to and said, I've been playing your games, I've been showing your games. Here's one I've made, and what do you make of it? But it took a long time. It's very hard.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to discourage new designers. Go for it, but I think probably I went a lot slower than most new designers. It took me a long time.
How long did it take you to make your first game?
Well, I think Renegade started life in 2010, and it was released last year. So that was a long.
Wow.
Amazing. 8 years of till I got there.
And you went through Kickstarter.
Yes, so I mean, it wasn't going to be a Kickstarter game when I took it to Victory Point Games. I think in 2012 was when they first saw it. It was thematically it was a very different game. Mechanically, it was the same game, but yeah, as for a first-time designer, it's hard to get to the top of a publisher's list.
Sure.
If you work with, if you're a designer that's renowned and has made games before, and you want to push a design, then you're going to jump the queue because it makes commercial sense, right? To go with well-known designers. To take a chance on an unknown is a risk for a publishing house. Yeah. But Kickstarter enables that these days, right?
But you also had a brand name for hobbyists as well. I mean, definitely that's why I backed it, was because, here's my go-to guy for solo games, and he's making what will play beautifully as a solo game. I'm in. I mean, who's going to know more about solo games than Ricky Royal? So if I mean, and also I think if I had to pick my favorite theme for games that is underutilized, it's cyberpunk. I mean, I'm like a massive William Gibson fan, and just all of the references. I was just like, I couldn't have hit the Kickstarter button faster with your name and that theme attached. So it was,
Excellent. Well, the credit goes to Alan and Victory Point Games for getting to the theme, because they liked the game mechanisms, but they said, "Can we change the theme?"
Interesting.
And then they offered me a choice of, I don't know, I think it was 3 or 4 different ideas. Can you go this way, that way, this way? And
can I ask what the original theme was?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally so Renegade is like, say, a cyberpunk, and it's a very thematically, it's a very closed, kind of claustrophobic world that you're living. Everything is small because you're inside a computer, and you have tiles which represent servers in a network. In the original game, those tiles were regions of Great Britain. So it was actually each tile was like, there was one for Wessex, there was one for Northumbria, there was one for Mercia. So they were actually like counties of a map. So it was a much bigger scale. And in Renegade, the bad guys, if you like, are the little computer programs that you're fighting against. Well, in the original game, those things were the Britons. They were peoples. So yeah, it was very, very much it was like a Dark Ages themed game as opposed to what it is now. But the underlying mechanisms were that I wanted you to have like so you have a deck building mechanism that allows you to manage your hand of cards, and with that hand of cards act upon the board, and the units that are on the board are things that also evolve, and as they power up they gain different abilities. So those kind of two knitted together mechanisms are the foundation of the original game and of what we see now in Renegade. So it was those kind of ideas that they liked, and those are the things that are developed. And it's strange, when you change the theme of the game, you really have to strip it back. So it became those raw mechanisms, and then I kind of had to build it up from the ground. And maybe this is why it took so long, because it was a couple of years developing the Anglo-Saxon Dark Ages game, and then a couple more years to strip it all away and rebuild it, because you have to tie theme and mechanics together. I don't like pasted on themes myself. I like things to knit. So I had to create a whole new atmosphere by just changing the interactions of all the cards and the effects they had and the abilities that the units, the tokens had on the board, in order to evoke the right sense of what the game was about. So that was a fun experience. But
so the game does some things that I think are brilliant, which is, I mean, first of all, it's hard not to notice the similarities to Mage Knight, at least in terms of, I mean, the components. I mean, you're building a map from these hex pieces, you're deck building, you're moving through this land. But yours, it almost felt like, because when I saw the Kickstarter, it was like, oh, it's Mage Knight in 30 minutes. Like, was that ever sort of a thought?
It wasn't, but you are going to be inspired by the things that you enjoy. So it was clear. People talked about Pandemic, which is another game that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you're cleaning up viruses. Me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And those games that I enjoyed playing. I mean, I made it a game that, for me, it was the game I wanted to play, and it's strangely, it sounds a little bit egotistic, but I do still play my own game because I enjoy playing.
That's great.
But as well as designing Renegade, it's been something that's allowed me to work, and I guess that kind of helped. Box of Lights helped bring Renegade to the world, because it meant I kind of got a foot in the door with publishers, but also it helped me kind of establish some credentials that allowed me to work with other designers as well, and that's something that I've really enjoyed. So as well as working with Cole on Pax Pamir.
Yeah. So tell us how that happened. How did you get involved with Cole?
I was trying to recall, because I thought you guys are bound to ask. I know one of the things I like to do is make my own rules up and kind of change things. We all do, right? We all like to house rule stuff.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite games is Pax Pamir, Phil Eklund game.
That's right. And you had done a solo, a solo variant for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's Phil Eklund's game and solo variant, but I played it and found I wanted to change things about his solo variant. So I made changes and I sent them to Phil and said, here you go. I think it's better with this. And he said, thank you very much. That's lovely. And then Pax Pamir came along, and I can't remember if Phil asked me or whether I just did it and again sent it to him. I think it might have been the latter. And Phil really liked it, or maybe he showed Cole. And that's the bit where I'm a little bit fuzzy. I can't really remember. But I did the solo rules for the first edition of Pax Pamir off the back of Furiana, and I know Cole must have liked them, and they included them in the Kyber Knives expansion. That was how we got in. That's how we got the first edition solo rules done, and it was kind of using a method that I employed for Furiana. And lots of other games that I've written solo variants for. I did some solo variant with Tony Boydell for Guilds of London, and that was published. And I did some work with Ragnar Brothers on some of their solo variants, and enjoyed those collaborations. And then with second edition Pax Pamir, Cole has taken the game away from Sierra Madre and published it under Whirligig Games, their own publishing house with Drew Worley as well. And they invited me to kind of have another look at the solo rules and work with them. One of the things that on those other collaborations, writing solo rules, I've always been limited by the components within the game, and I had to try and create a solo variant with what was in the box already.
Sure.
So it was kind of the solo game come afterwards. But with Cole and the second edition, it was a bit more, do what you want. We're going to kickstart the game. If you want to make new components, we'll make them new components. And they kind of gave me a little bit more of a free rein on what to build. And that was a great opportunity to be a bit more creative. Yeah.
I think you did something brilliant there because you didn't use a lot of components. I mean, you made an entire AI opponent out of, I think, 24 cards, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and that
was a lesson that's a lesson I think that Victory Point Games taught me with Renegade, was when you're creating something. My original game with Renegade was huge. It was much there, and you've got to kind of learn to be economic with making a game that's viable as something you can produce and sell at a profit.
Do you still have a playable copy of the original theme?
Oh, for Renegade.
For Renegade.
I don't know. I think my copy, I made one that I sent to them. And here's a great tip for any budding designers. And what I did is I made a copy and I videoed it. So I gave them you might just drop them an email or something or send them in the post. Well, I made them a quick 15-minute video and said, here, and
that's what you do.
And pitched it to them, face to face. But no, I sent them my copy, and I think I have no idea where that ended up. I have no idea.
Well,
I think it's called Dawn of England or something at the time.
Okay. There you go.
But somebody's got it somewhere. I think you can still find remnants of it on Board Game Geek.
Right,
if you want to go search for it, it's called Seofan, which is Anglo-Saxon for the number 7, Seofan. So you can go look it up.
Amazing.
And yeah, there you go. You'll find an embryo of Renegade in there somewhere if you go and look at it.
So I'm always fascinated on. I mean, I love solo games. I mean, this whole episode's about solo games, and we're going to go down my top 10 after this interview. But awesome. I'm always really the reason I think I love solo games so much is I'm always excited to see how someone is going to make a game out of just one person playing that doesn't feel like just a puzzle, right? Because I don't want to sit down and just solve a puzzle. If I wanted to do that, there's other hobbies that I feel facilitate that better, mostly things in video game world. But what I look for in a solo board gaming is definitely I want more storytelling than I would probably want in a strategy game, in a multiplayer game. And I want variability. I want it to feel like every time I play, I can have a different experience, right? I don't want it to be solvable.
Right. Play it once and you never have to play it again.
Yeah. So those are sort of my two, and I'm always interested to see, because that's hard. That is a hard design task to figure out a way to do that, especially if the game is also going to work successfully as a multiplayer game. So I've found lately that an AI deck is the most successful route for me, at least in terms of giving that feeling. So there's a great AI deck in Wingspan. There's a great AI deck in Gaia Project. And there's a great AI deck in Pax Pamir. And what's funny is I think when I did my unboxing video of Pax Pamir, I said like, I didn't know at the time that you had designed it because I was just unboxing it. And, I thought, this person obviously loved Gaia Project because they seem so influenced by this design thing. And then you said in your comment that you actually hadn't played it yet. So I was like, well, that's absolutely amazing because they both use this. I mean, it must just be, designers with great brains come to this sort of similar, like two cards next to each other kind of thing. But how did that come to you?
I haven't. And it's one of those. It should be I was going to say, is it an adage? It ought to be an adage. But whatever you dream up in board gaming, you can guarantee somebody else has already thought of it. Because it's very, very hard to think of anything original, and even when you think you have, you find out it wasn't as original as you thought, that somebody else had done it first. But with first edition Pamir, when I did the solo rules. And it came from Porfiriana, really. It was the idea of rolling dice to produce a random outcome. And I guess it's in the psychology of us as gamers. When we see that little cube and we roll it, we think random. And we think random when we think that the outcome has been, I don't know, it's in the hand of some lady luck or the law of the gods
Right.
or something, and it's we're cheated by those dice. And what I wanted to do with second edition was, I knew I had to have random elements, because random elements produce drama, and also, it's really hard if you're doing a solo variant to create something that feels like it plays like a human player. You're making something out of cardboard, out of paper. This isn't a massive computer with a lots of processing power. This isn't Deep Blue or AlphaGo. You can't make something play like a person. You can't with bits of paper. But what you have to do is you have to fool the players into thinking that it's playing with some agency, that it is like a real person. And you can play with the ideas of what we as soloists think's going on. And if you roll a die or draw a card, it feels like the drawing of the card has more agency than the rolling of the die, despite the fact that they're both random. So I knew I wanted to create that. I mean, if you look at the back of those cards, it's still 0 to 5. It's not 1 to 6, but it's not, it's
right.
But it's not a die roll.
Right.
And I knew I wanted a random number generator that wasn't a die roll, and that's what I came up with. And lo and behold, I'm sure that those things have been made before. But it felt original, and it felt good, and it worked.
It works.
And
it works
wasn't just
beautifully. Yeah, it really does. And there's you packed so much information on each of those cards too. It's really, you don't need the rule book. I mean, once you digest how it works. What I love about also in a solo game is I don't want to be looking at, I mean, I love coin games. They're interesting, but I spend 90% of a coin game learning how to play the coin game and 10% of it playing it. And in Pax Pamir, I think after I read the rule book once or twice, I can just sit down and play a game, and everyone is different. And and I really appreciate that in a solo design. Yeah,
that was really high up there on the requirement list, was playability. Playability is king, and when people ask me why does Wakan, I like to name my automata in my solo variants. This one's called Wakan. In first edition, it was Shere-Khan. This one's Wakan.
And I appreciate that you gave it a female gender as well, because so often we have just sort of the everybody just names their whatever it is some male. But I did appreciate that you went against the grain on that.
Yes, I think we're all a little bit sensitive to that, but also it just felt right for the name, and but yeah, it's still a series of random events in a sense, but it feels, and you mentioned the counterinsurgency games, the coin games, they have these big flow charts that you follow. So
they're crazy.
There's not the random elements. They're trying to go for the AlphaGo, the Deep Blue solution, but with one sheet of A4, and it kind of, I mean, so much as I like those games, those things slow the game right down.
Oh yeah, it takes 20 minutes for a turn that's not yours, and 3 minutes for your turn.
Yeah. So I wanted to be sure that Wakan, when she did her thing, it was boom boom boom. It was quick, Yeah. And the same when I did Renegade. When the games do, in co-op games or in solo games, you're playing against the game. I want the game to do its thing real quick, so that I can get on with making all my clever decisions. And so there's lots of random stuff on those cards, but there's also a little section where she has 3 options. I'm going to do option A, option B, option C. And those things, I guess, were more inspired by games like Conflict of Heroes.
I love Conflict of Heroes. That's a fantastic game. That was one of my very first favorite solo games as well.
Right, and the cards there have, if this situation, do this, if this situation, do that, and you move it down in a hierarchy. And that's really, that was the most direct, I guess, inspiration for what I did with Pamir. But what I did was I sat down and set the game up for 2-player, and it was me against me. And what I did is went to build Wakan's decision-making tree, if you like. I took my move, and then I took Wakan's move, and I said to myself, what am I doing? and I'm saying like if in this situation I would build right now, and then I would move right now, or I would battle right now. So those became Wakan's choices, and I would make the card, and I would say these are the two actions that I would make if I was the artificial opponent, and I would write those down as her choices. And I built the deck like that, and then I'd rerun it through, and then just kind of refine it and refine it and refine it. So if you're playing Wakan, you're kind of playing against me, that the times that I
Right.
sat down and made decisions. But obviously the board state and the game state is not the same as when that card is drawn as when I made the card. But what's interesting and what it became is, as I refined those decisions that Wakan was making, they didn't become more complicated, because they started off with, if there's a dominance in dominance check in the market, and if the climate is such and such, and if Wakan has enough 5 rupees or more, then do this. They started more complex, but they didn't become more complex as it developed. They became less complex until it became just simple actions in a series that and I guess I feel this happens the same with you mentioned Wingspan and the Automa Factory. They do the same kind of thing. They have a stack of cards that make player-like decisions. That it feels like those cards have some kind of agency, which they don't. They're just a random deck of cards, but it kind of feels that way. But at the same time, it's more than just a little random, because although the game state is not the same as when I wrote the card that said this would be a good thing for the player to do, every now and again the game state does marry up. And when Wakan makes that decision to build and then move and then battle, it just feels like a very human-like, all the stars have aligned, and at that point that was a really good decision for her to make. And I guess if Wakan makes 20 decisions and one of them feels very human-like,
well,
it's not
it's funny
the Turing test, but it just feels at that moment you remember it as a great decision for her to do, and it's like, wow. And that's the thing that stays with you when you play.
Well, that happened to me yesterday.
Those moments.
That happened to me in a game yesterday where I was trying I had a very strong plan of how I was going to do this. I was going to get the event card that makes it so I only need two more pieces to get dominance, and I had it all set up, and I cleared the way, and on the next turn, that happened to be the number that she bought randomly, and I didn't get to do it, and it was awesome. It really felt like she screwed me there.
Did it on purpose?
Yeah.
What you said about basically playing against yourself to try and create the AI. Did you? Because I grew up. My father was a huge chess player, and I watched him constantly playing against himself in a game of chess and spinning the board and just pitting his mind against himself. Is that something you ever did?
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, you have to playing chess, right? You have to study positions.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about creating this variant is I would sit with a position. There's a deck of 24 cards, but each one, it kind of took a long time to mull over, because you're thinking and studying and saying, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I did that? And that's one thing as a gamer I really enjoy about gaming, is being able to study a position. And as a soloist, you have that luxury, because you can take the time, and no one's saying, hurry up, it's my turn. And for a solo game, I think, unless it's telling a really good story where the outcome doesn't really matter, then and there are games like that. There are absolute games like that. I'm thinking like Robinson Crusoe, Ignacy Trzewiczek's game. The outcome doesn't matter. Most inevitably I'm going to lose, but it's the story that's being told that's more enjoyable than the victory. But in games like Pax Pamir, the victory is everything, because it really is a very it's not a strategic game. I don't think it's a tactical game, because the game state's changing quite a lot underneath you, and in the solo game, Wakan will change the game state to an extent that it's hard to strategize. You can create a strategy, but with Pamir, the strategy that you adopt is going to be dictated kind of by the setup. You talk about variability and replayability. I think that's with Pamir. You don't really know where the game is going to go until you see that initial 12 card market and
Right.
pick your initial loyalty.
Totally.
And only then do you know what the game is going to be. And particularly with, I think what the solo game, people will want to play it multiplayer because and that's a different game. With the solo game, let me say that I think one of the problems that people have learning Pax Pamir multiplayer is understanding the game state. Playing solitaire, it's actually made easier because you're on your own. It's just you against Wakan, and in the multiplayer game, you've got a lot of unpredictability about what the other players are going to do, and people can kind of scupper your plans purposely. Wakan's not going to do that purposely, but I mean, she kind of. If there's any tip on how to beat Wakan in the solo game, it's to try and understand that Wakan is something that you have to try and manipulate because you can control her. And that was an important element about designing an AI for this game or for any game really, is having it's not so much having an opponent that plays like a human, but allowing the human player to play as if they were playing another human. And so often some elements of the game are removed from the solo game. I think there's only one element really that's removed from the solo game in this, and that's the negotiation part. You can't bribe Wakan because it's not human. But
she has some weaknesses you can definitely exploit.
Exactly, and you've got to be able to exploit them. So I think I could have said Wakan doesn't have any money, for example. She doesn't have to pay for actions. But one of the important aspects of Pamir is controlling that.
Yeah, that closed economy.
That closed economy and keeping control of the money and who's got it and who hasn't. So if I took that away from the players, then you'd lose that element of the game. If Wakan didn't care about money, then you couldn't control that artificial opponent by controlling the flow of money. So that had to stay, and all those elements had to stay.
Something you just said a moment ago touched on a question I was going to actually ask Matt, but I'd love to ask you both, which is, as a solo player playing that game, do you think playing that game gets you better and better prepared to play against other people?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Ricky. Yeah.
I think that's a great question because it kind of has to. If it doesn't, it's a different game, and that's what people want, is they want to be able to understand the game. And as a soloist, I think something about solo gamers is the desire to want to study the game, and spending time on your own with the game means the only thing that you have is you and the mechanism. So I think inherently soloists want to study the game.
Yeah, I think
unless there's a great story to be told.
I think to me there's three types of solo games. There's a game that is best at solo, and that is how it's meant to be played. There is a game with a great solo AI that will train you to get better at the game and can be there for reps. And then there's a game with a solo component that's really just training. So you can learn how to play the game and isn't necessarily going to take you to an advanced level. But I think Pax Pamir does a great job of being sort of one and two. I mean, it's a really fun solo game. I would recommend this to people even if they only played it solo. I think it's that good. And I think there's very few games that are not designed just for solo that I would recommend people purchase just for the solo. But this would. But I also think I like it's making me a better player. And I think that's a necessary thing for an AI to do in a game like this.
Yeah, I think you can see, particularly, I think with Wakan doesn't. We're kind of assuming that your audience knows a lot about the game already.
Yeah, we'll have already gone through the review. Yeah.
So cool. And with Wakan, one of the things that players will want to do is they'll want to have a dominant faction. They'll want there to be a successful dominance check. But many times there won't be. And what that means is you have to learn as a player how to deal with the unsuccessful dominance. And that's one thing I think that the solo game teaches you as a player. It says, how do you get your cylinders out on the board to outnumber Wakans so that you can get the points? And you have time to just figure that out. And I think you'll be able to bring that into your multiplayer games a lot. Where am I going to put my spies? Where am I going to put my tribes? How can I protect my tribes with my armies, which is another dimension then? And then how can I get the political cards that I need to grow the depth of my tableau, which also let me put tribes on the board, which help me protect my tribes so I don't have to lose my political cards, which will shrink my tableau. And everything suddenly starts to tie together, and you've got time to just create that link of, this means this and that means this. And, a lot about how to play Pax Pamir is understanding how everything ties together, how one part of your gameplay influences another part. When you come into it as a first-time player, those links are quite tenuous, but by the time you've finished playing, a dozen, half a dozen, 3 or 4 even solo games, you've got those things down. Because Pamir is one of those games that does reward repeat play, and it's a game that you can get better at.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, part of what learning to get better at that game is realizing that you can't control very much in between your turns, but what you can do is build an engine that can be better prepared for anything than everybody else.
Right. That's it.
And I think
understanding that.
Yeah,
that
I think
you've
Khan trains you for that.
Depth, your tableau is deep enough to deal with whatever your opponent's going to throw at you.
Right. So when that dominance card comes out, you're better prepared than anybody else to deal with whatever is necessary to be done to score the most points there.
Yeah. And keeping that card in your hand that when it may not do anything for you when you pick it up, but picking it up stops the other person getting it. And that's an important thing about the solo thing is, very often I'm looking at the market, and I know what I'm worried about what Khan's going to do. Like she's a real person.
Yeah, no, I know. You see the purple cards
out there. So many
there.
times I'll buy a card thinking, I know she's going to get it just to spite me. So you get it to spite her, and so she does take on a life of her own, and you learn those tricks, even from playing a non-human.
Absolutely. Well, I think you did a beautiful job with it, and congrats on it. It is definitely like one of the top solo experiences for a strategy game that I've experienced yet, and something that I'll definitely point to people who want to understand what a great solo Euro is that also has a high thematic element to it.
Well, thank you. It's very kind, and I'm very proud to be just a small part of something that Cole and Drew have put together as a great product, because I think, it looks fabulous. It plays fabulously, and I think it'll. Gorgeous. And it's really great to see, because when first edition came out, these little PAX games, they're very niche, and I think it's what they've done with the production is make it help these games reach a wider audience.
Yeah.
And I think that's great for gaming, because these are the kind of games that give people a very different experience.
Yeah.
And that's one thing you'll know as reviewers, you're always looking for a new experience, and even if it's new to you and it's been around for a while, because these games have been, to get people playing them is great, because it just broadens people's experience of board game and what it can do.
Yeah, the PAX games are almost becoming a genre unto themselves, like 18xx at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, can you tell us, I saw on your website what looks to be your next game, Console Cowboy. Can you tell us anything about it, or what we can see next from you?
Well, next from me, but thanks for looking at the website. I like to drop things there, but Console Cowboy is something I'm working on as a brand new game. But next for me would be more Renegade content, and everyone's been asking, because Tabletop Tycoon acquired Victory Point Games, so Victory Point became part of their family of publishers, alongside Starling Games, who did Everdell, which I think was well received last year. So we are looking at kickstarting the second edition of Renegade with a whole bunch of new content. I've got 2 expansions which are done. They're ready to go. We've got a little bit of artwork to finish. So any time now, we should be looking at getting that Kickstarter going. I don't have dates, but that's what's coming. Kickstarter's a new way of things, right? I was at UK Games Expo recently and talking to Ignacy Shevchuk of Portal Games. They're kickstarting right now one of their games, and that's a completely new thing for them. But
Pret-a-Porter.
Exactly. That's the world we're in now, and I think it's a great model for.
I think Fantasy Flight Games will be kickstarting soon. You never know.
Right. It's why not? It's kind of becoming a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But that's what's coming up. More Renegade content, because it was a bit of a surprise how the reception that we got, and like Pax Pamir, it's a game that reviewers have to work hard to present, because Renegade is one of those games that's not a gateway game. It does ask a lot of people to learn it and to play it.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for all those people who have had a crack at it, but I know a lot of reviewers will struggle with it because it's quite got a bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of game it was meant to be. And people who have invested in the game are really loving it, and it's been a wonderful experience to interact with gamers and answer all their questions. And I've heard so much feedback on the game and what people are enjoying and what they're not, that's allowed us to really develop these next expansions and hopefully a second edition that's going to be even better for people. Nothing changed really in the base game. A few little things tightened up, but everything else will be the same. But the expansions are really going to bring a different kind of climax to the game. You're going to have end game bosses. I'm trying to build the story and maybe a little campaign mode in there.
Right.
So lots of new stuff in that. And Console Cowboys doesn't have a publisher yet. If anyone's interested, I'm hoping it will be a kind of a follow up in the same universe.
Well, it's definitely a theme that's
Clark Miller's artwork is key to that. And the same kind of theme, but it kind of flips the tables and asks you to be the people protecting the network rather than the hackers.
Right, the corpse.
So that's what that one's all about.
Oh, that's
but
exciting.
I've got a few other things that I'm working on as well, but I'll keep those under my hat for now. But I'm not working on any more. Well, actually, I do have a little collaboration on the go, but I'm not going to talk about that just yet until we've figured things out. But collaborations I love as well, and it's really nice to get to meet publishers and designers and kind of help give existing games a new lease of life with just how wonderful solo gaming is.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be something that I can help people with, is just show them how to make a solo game. Because we all, I think more and more, I think it's probably too late to say this now because it's been building for years. Solo gaming has arrived. It's not arriving. It has arrived.
It's a ton of value for games. I mean, for people who buy a game and they spend $40 to $100 on a board game, to be able to play it anytime you want is huge added value to people. Not just wait for their weekly game night or the next time they're able to convince someone to sit down. So I think to me it's a huge added value for a board game.
Yeah, my daughter came to we talked about my daughter and playing games together. Last week, the first time she came to me and said, have you got a game I can play, Daddy? And yeah, sure. What do you want? Have you got a game I can play on my own? And it was like, yes, I do.
Amazing.
So yeah, that was wonderful. That was great.
You did that for me too, and I'm sure for many other people out there. So it makes sense that your daughter would be next in line. Well, so Ricky, thank you so much. If anybody wants to get any more information on Ricky Royal, his Box of Delights YouTube channel is beyond worth a subscribe. You must, if you like board games, you must subscribe to his YouTube channel. His website is boxofdelights.net. You can find him on Twitter at Ricky Royal Bod. And I will not hit a button faster than when the Kickstarter comes out for 2.0 of Renegade. So I'm very excited for it. I traveled with it recently and was playing it in a hotel room, and it's a perfect travel game because it is the quintessence of an asymmetrical, every time you play is different kind of a thing. So it's definitely, you get a lot of, it doesn't take up a huge footprint when you bring it with you. So it's definitely a great travel game. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Ricky. Well, thank you so much, man.
Thanks
we won't
so
take
much,
up any more of your time, but I really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Good night, guys. Thanks for having me.